Hello, my name is Alex Trenoweth. I'm here in London, England, freezing to death. It's a very cold winter's evening, but I'm here to talk about my latest book, which is called Mirror, Mirror, The Astrology of Famous People and the Actors Who Portrayed Them. This book is, it's been called a labor of love. And I would say, yeah, because it was hard work, but yet it was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed pretty much most of what I was doing. There were a few movies I didn't like very much, but I'll talk a little bit about them in a bit. Um, but it all started with a movie called Julie and Julia, not Aaron Brockovich. I'll get to Julie and Julia in a minute. But Aaron Brockovich was this movie about a single mother, a beauty queen, who at the beginning of the film was trying to find employment. And she was told time and time again, she didn't have the experience, she didn't have the qualifications to be whatever she wanted to apply for. And it ended up being quite a humiliating experience after a very long day. And as she was traveling home, she was hit by another vehicle. And she ended up, of course, in hospital with neck injuries. And she wanted to take a lawsuit out against the person who had hit her. Unfortunately, in court, she kind of lost her cool and ended up swearing, and she lost her case anyway. It didn't matter if she swore or not, which is what her point was with her lawyer, because the lawyer said, oh, if you'd only knew how to act the right way, you wouldn't have lost. And she said, well, that's a load of nonsense because I lost the case before I even walked in the room. And so she managed to sort of twist this lawyer's arm into giving her a job, sort of as a legal clerk. And she stumbled upon a very important case where the people of this place in Hinckley were being slowly poisoned by hexachromovalent, which was poisoning the groundwater. And so she started making a case against PG&E, which was this massive power company. And she ended up winning a whole lot of money on behalf of the people of Hinckley. So the actor was Julia Roberts. She was described as being incandescent in her role as Erin Brockovich. And so let's look at the chart. Now, in Mirror, Mirror, what I wanted to be careful of is astrologers are often accused of sort of finding connections and of sort of over egging the pudding, in that they're finding connections that aren't really there. So one of the things I wanted to be careful of is that I stuck reasonably close to conjunctions and oppositions, and maybe to a lesser extent squares. And I wanted to keep the orbs very tight. So when I talk about a conjunction between the actor and the real life person, I wanted to only look at a couple of degrees if I was going to say there's this connection. So for example, we have Erin Brockovich's Pluto at 3 degrees Virgo, and we have Julia Roberts' Jupiter at 1 degree Virgo. So this would be an example of a conjunction where I would say, okay, this is a conjunction. I'm not going to give it the usual 8 degrees one way or 8 degrees the other. I want to keep it fairly tightly in orb. So let's think about what this means. So this real life person, Erin Brockovich, was looking at poisonous substances that were harming a community. And I think this is pretty much describes Pluto in Virgo. And just to point out too, sometimes I didn't have the exact time of birth and I had to resort to using a noon chart. And I understand, as astrologers, we want to have as precise data as we possibly can. But I also don't want to dismiss the value of a noon chart, because there is still a lot of value in using a chart at noon. For example, Pluto, it wouldn't make much of a difference whether, Erin was born at 6 in the morning or at 6 in the evening. It wouldn't pull, more than, a few seconds away from this. And same with Julia Roberts' Jupiter. So let's look at this conjunction that we have here. We established that Erin Brockovich sort of fits this idea of Pluto in Virgo. And here we have Julia Roberts' Jupiter in Virgo, sort of magnifying and taking, the key concepts out of this this poisoning that's going on within this community, and she's getting a legal case out of it. Legality being something we might associate with with Jupiter. And let's also look at Aaron Brockovich's North Node, also in Virgo, with Julia Roberts, Pluto in Virgo. So we got this idea that Julia Roberts is taking her transformative side, and it's plugging nicely into Aaron Brockovich's sense of destiny. And I found quite a few times that the nodes were extremely important in allowing the actor to step into the real life narrative of the person that they were portraying. And the other thing I did was I wanted to look at the transits for when the movie was released. So again, I don't know exactly what time, all the premieres started. So I had to use a noon chart. But we can look at these transits and sort of get some information. For example, if we look around here, we have the transiting Mercury right on Aaron Brockovich's Chiron. We're talking about a woman who was within the local community, talking to people who had been injured in some way. And she's bringing out their story to be heard by a cinema audience. So, I find that these transits are really important because it's when the story was released. It's when we become aware of what's going on in these people's lives. So let's move on to a different case study. Tanya. As much as I admire Julia Roberts' acting ability, Margot Robbie, who played Tanya Harding, she had to learn how to ice skate. Now, she might have known how to ice skate a little bit, the way we all kind of can go out and put skates on and, maybe do a little lap or something like that. No, she was at it 5 or 6 hours a day, 4 or 5 times a week, learning how to do all these special things. I'm so sorry about that. I'm sorry about that noise. And so she had to learn how to do this ice skating, which was, oh, I'm so sorry. And we're back. Sorry about that. I had a bit of interference going on this side. So I was talking about Margot Robbie, who portrayed Tanya Harding in I, Tonya, and I was explaining how much practice the actor had to put into getting into her role. And I was saying that, it's not just a matter of, fancy, CGI. It is the hard work that she had to put into learning how to ice skate. Those falls that we see on screen were real falls. And if you've ever fallen ice skating, it hurts. And I'm so full of admiration for ice skaters, professional ice skaters, because they kind of know they're going to fall. And the speed at which they fall is quite terrifying. And, you can look at old, or not even old footage of ice skaters, and you can see the things that they do. And they're, for example, the thing that Tanya Harding was known for, the triple lutz, she has to ice skate backwards and almost do like this blind leap, and turn around 3 times, and hopefully she lands on her feet. Well, Margot Robbie didn't quite manage to do the triple lutz, but she does actually do some of the takeoff moves, which made I, Tanya such an interesting movie. So let's have a little look. Oh, and by the way, I, Tanya became one of the first sports biopics to actually be nominated for an Academy Award. So let's have a little look at what's going on here in their charts. So as usual, here we have Tanya Harding in the middle. Tanya Harding's chart, she has, this is a time chart, 8:22 p.m. Portland, Oregon. She has the moon conjunct Saturn. And in the movie, her mom is so mean and so cruel to her. And all her mom wants to do is for Tanya to become a champion. And you can see the mom on the sidelines swearing and smoking away and really being quite horrible and abusive to her daughter in the hopes of producing this champion. And, Tanya, she was as far removed from the typical ice skater that you could ever imagine. You know, we think of ice skaters, figure skaters, as being these tall, beautiful, um, graceful women, whereas Tanya Harding was not really like that. She was small and fierce, and she had this kind of trailer trash, as much as I hate that term, kind of image. The music that she chose, the costumes that she had to sew by hand, all these things set her apart from the other little princesses that were on the ice rink. And there on the sideline is the mom, you know, swearing and smoking at this poor girl. So we can see not only is Saturn conjunct the moon, but she's also has the Venus, Jupiter, and Sun picked up as an opposite in this. And have a look at where Margot Robbie's Pluto is. It plugs right into this opposition. So I think that Margot Robbie kind of understood this dilemma that Tanya Harding was in that she had this super cruel mother, and yet she had this really tough image, this scorpionic stuff going on. That was like, okay, if I fall down, I'm going to get up and I'm going to carry on, and I'm going to do something nobody else has done. And the thing about working with data is actually in the book, I had to use this tri-wheel with Margot Robbie's time of birth as a noon chart. But when I was looking at just checking every now and again to see if, you know, someone else's time of birth comes up, yesterday I realized Margot Robbie's time of birth has been released. So it'll be quite interesting in a couple of years' time to go back and recheck this data and to see, you know, who else's time of birth has been updated. But, you know, let's have a little look at what was going on in transit-wise when I, Tanya was released. So check this out, okay? So we got transiting Pluto right on Tanya Harding's descendant. And what is Tanya Harding most known for? Well, she's known for being involved in the kneecapping of her biggest competitor, you know, sort of taking away her competitor's ability to skate and to possibly compete against her. Other interesting things going on too in this chart. We have Mercury, again, telling the story about the past and about what was going on in Tanya Harding's life. And why do we have the Tanya Harding that we all know, as opposed to that little ice skating princess? You know, we have, you know, a woman who grew up in a very difficult circumstance, who actually, when her skating career was finished, because it was taken away from her for her involvement in kneecapping Nancy Kerrigan, you know, she transformed herself into a boxer. And at the end of the film, she was like, you know, what else have I done in my life but fight? And, you know, so if you haven't seen I, Tanya, I know I suggest that you get this chart and you have a little look at it, keep it by your side, because we also have, we now know Margot Robbie's ascendant only a few degrees away from Tanya Harding's ascendant. And also we have her Jupiter, which is in a couple degrees of Tanya's ascendant. But have a look at Chiron. Here we have Margot Robbie tapping into the essence of Tanya Harding's personality, and out of that pulling the pain, because we never knew how much Tanya Harding suffered for her craft. We only sort of get the idea that she was talented. And don't you hate that word talented? It takes away the hard work that the person has done. Like when you say to a musician, oh, you're so talented, and the musician is like, no, actually I practice. Oh, but you are a phenomenal superstar, and you are just, you know, you have everything, you know, going for you. And they're like, no, I practice. And it's the same thing with Tanya Harding. You know, as I said, you know, this, when you see a champion ice skater, you're looking at somebody who's fallen a lot, who's been injured, who knows what it's like to be embarrassed, to fall flat in their face in front of people and be hurt. And so, you know, I think Margot Robbie, you know, tapped right into that, because she too has probably fallen and has been injured, because she went through the same experiences as Tanya Harding. So this one is also from my favorite section, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. So this is about a journalist, and he's quite a hard-nosed journalist, and he's got this reputation for being able to turn sort of heroes into villains. And he's having problems with his father. He hasn't seen his father for a long time. He kind of blames his father for his mother's suffering and subsequent death. And they get into a fight at this journalist's sister's wedding. And the father's trying to reconnect with his son. And the journalist is a new father, and he just doesn't want his dad around him at all. And so the journalist is assigned to do an interview with Mr. Rogers. And you probably know who Mr. Rogers is. He's the children's television show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. He's a star. I've always loved him when I was a kid. And he always had this way of speaking to the camera and encouraging kindness and goodness amongst his audience. And I think that it's fair to say that he shaped at least a few generations of children to be more compassionate and to show more understanding towards each other. So anyway, the journalist sets out to bring down Mr. Rogers. And in the meantime, he finds out that the reason why his father wants to meet up with him is because the father is dying. And so Mr. Rogers helps him to realize, you are a product of the people that you brought up with, and you need to honor the people that loved you into being. And so through this talk and through this experiences with Fred Rogers, the journalist learns about sort of like how to love again, and how to let go, to release, and to forgive his father, and to let his father go with peace of mind. So let's have a look at the charts. So fortunately for this, we have 2 time charts. So Mr. Rogers is in the middle as usual. Tom Hanks, also a time chart, who played Mr. Rogers, is on the outside. So what are they bringing to each other? So they have this Pluto conjunction going on, and they have it either way. And we have also, let me try again. Let's go with Fred Rogers, Saturn conjunct the South Node happening here. So he's not a strict person, but he is somebody who has a strong sense of moral purpose. And when this movie was released, Jupiter was transiting this point and expanding this strong sense of moral purpose, of supporting somebody who is maybe not doing the right thing, and having a difficult time understanding the transformative effects that life often brings us. And here we have Mr. Rogers, Pluto in Cancer. Fred Rogers, of course, was all about looking after children. And we have Tom Hanks' Sun right on the Pluto, only within a few degrees, which to me kind of brings out this tendency. It highlights this transformative effect of Fred Rogers' need to understand people. And when the movie was released, the North Node was transiting Fred Rogers' Pluto exactly. But there's more things going on. We have Tom Hanks' Pluto in Leo transiting the Neptune of Fred Rogers. So, the tapping into the compassionate nature of the real life person by the actor is shown here. My very favorite is Rocket Man. I hope everyone's had a chance to see this. Taron Egerton played Elton John. And the movie starts off with, you see Elton John dressed as a demon or a fallen angel coming through these doors, which we eventually realize is rehab. And he's got these big old angel wings and these horns and stuff like that. And he sits down, he starts talking about his childhood. And every time you find a revelation about Elton John, he takes a little bit of his costume off. And we go through all his early beginnings as a child in a home where he felt rejected by his father, through his training for the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. We learn about his closeness to his grandmother, and then we see him transition into a famous rock star, and he gets trapped in all the stuff that rock stars often get trapped into, such as drugs and sex, and all these things that really wear him down a bit. And sorry, it's a bit of an understatement. Wear him down almost to his own demise, because he has a suicide event He falls into a swimming pool and tries to kill himself in front of his mother and his lover, as well as Bernie Taupin, who's his lyricist. And it shows him, he's singing Rocket Man in the scene at the hospital where he gets his stomach pumped. And then we see him sort of getting ready to go on stage 2 days later, and he's performing at Dodger Stadium. He gets a little injection and he gets pushed on stage. But he's clear from this movie that at this point, he's to the point of burnout. He's absolutely, can't do anymore. And Bernie is begging him, come take a break with me. And Elton says, no, you go take a break. I could do with working with other new people. And at this stage of his life is when he, really writes like the worst songs of his career. He ends up getting married to a woman, and his mother knows it's not going to last because she realizes that Elton John is homosexual. But nevertheless, Elton John tries to make this marriage work, but clearly it's not going to work, and he's not happy. Meanwhile, back at rehab, we see Elton John removing, a little bit of the outfit, little by little, until by the end of the film, he's dressed in plain clothes, and he's terrified that he can't possibly perform ever again. And Bernie's giving him some lyrics, and then Elton John sings his closing song, I'm Still Standing. Having a look at their chart. Now, Elton John is in the middle. Now, we have an uncertain time for Elton John, 4 p.m., but it's the one that I've used. And the thing that really caught my attention, also Taron Egerton has a 12 p.m. Time, noon chart that I'm using. But if we look at the sun moon, even if Elton John wasn't born at 4 p.m., he'd still have the sun roughly at 4 degrees Aries. And no matter what time of day that Taron Egerton was born, he would have the moon in Aries. So I think that the sun-moon conjunction at least brings a bit of understanding between the two. We have something very, very close to a conjunction, only 2 degrees away, with Elton's Venus in Aquarius and Taron Egerton's North Node in Aquarius. So Taron was able to understand, I think, Elton John's extravagances, because Elton John also has this Venus connection to Jupiter going on. So I think Taron was able to tap right into that and understand Elton's need for maybe eccentricity, for being his own sort of person, and needing to do his own thing, basically. The other thing to bear in mind about Elton John, Elton John has the sun exalted in Aries and the moon exalted in Taurus. I thought that was quite interesting. It's only 1 day of the year, 2 days of the year this can happen. It's a very special ceremony in India when the sun is exalted in Aries and the moon is exalted in Taurus. So when the movie was released, we have Neptune transiting in Pisces right on Elton John's Mars in Pisces. So what are we talking about? We're talking about Elton John's love of music, his passion for music, but also, sort of the escapism that was being highlighted in the film, his need for drugs, his need to shop till he drops, that kind of stuff that was happening in his life. Okay, so that was my favorite one. A few that we haven't talked about before, Gorillas in the Mist. So this is quite a sad one, really. So Diane Fossey is studying mountain gorillas, and she sort of really gets so involved in her work that she's utterly devoted to these apes. And there's poachers going around, killing various members of the group of apes. And she has a favorite named Digit, and she's trying to scare away the poachers. So she does things like there's a mock hanging, for example. There's other things that are going on to scare the poachers away. But they get a hold of Digit. And what they do with these mountain gorillas is they remove the head and the hands. And of course, they come across poor Digit's body. And Diane ends up burying the gorillas. One night she's murdered under very mysterious circumstances. And the end of the film shows her being buried next to her beloved gorilla, Digit. If we look at her chart, Diane Fossey's chart in the middle, she has all this passion for these big animals. And so we have the North Node because we just differentiate the sixth house being small animals, smaller than a goat, and the 12th house is being animals bigger than a goat. So here we have her North Node in the 12th house in Pisces, the final degree. This is a time chart, so we can look at some of the things going on. So Sigourney Weaver, who played Diane Fossey, has her North Node right on or within a couple degrees of Diane Fossey's ascendant. And it also nicely picks up Diane Fossey's Uranus in the 12th house in Aries. So, here we have this independent woman, Diane Fossey, who had to do things her own way, often by herself. And these are the circumstances in which she's murdered. But these are time charts. Check out these moons. They are exactly conjunct. So I think these two women, had they had an opportunity to meet in real life, there would have been this great understanding. But for an actor to have this similarity to the person they're playing, I think it gives them an advantage because they understand the nature of the person that they are portraying. And if we look during filming, Pluto in Scorpio would have been in opposition to these moons as well. Pluto, again, speaking about the transformative nature of the emotional life of both women. And in fact, Sigourney Weaver still supports the Diane Fossey Guerrilla Fund, some 30 years after this film was released. But what else do we have going on? We have Diane Fossey's Jupiter in Leo, and Sigourney Weaver's Pluto conjunct Mars, just within a few degrees of that Jupiter in Leo. So it's bringing Diane Fossey's story and her study, because that's what Jupiter is. It's about learning, it's about studying, it's about branching out your knowledge base. And Sigourney Weaver, as I said, she still continues to support the Guerrilla Fund that Diane Fossey began all those years ago. And the love, I think, of the guerrillas and the passion for what they were doing shows with Transiting Venus on this point as well, when the film was released. Meryl Streep is a striking actor because she is so amazing and she's done so many different biopics. And one of the things she's known for is her ability to do different accents. So in Sophie's Choice, she had an accent. She did A Cry in the Dark. She did an Australian accent, but she's actually from the States. So I think it's worthwhile just appreciating her as an actor without looking at anything else. So let's just look at Meryl Streep's natal chart. It's a timed chart, so we can look at the angles. So I think what makes her such a great actor is that she has Jupiter right on her descendant. And why do I say that? Well, because Jupiter in mythology appeared in different guises to different to people. So, for example, he was a shower of gold to Danae. He appeared as a shivering little bird on his soon-to-be wife Hera's windowsill. He shivered, and so she took the bird to her bosom, and then Zeus turned into Zeus. So I think Meryl Streep as an actor, this helps her to become different people, a different person to different people. She has this lovely Leo rising. She has Moon in Taurus in its exaltation. And she has a lot of this 11th house stuff, which I think makes her extremely likable to a large audience. And much of it is trying to Neptune into the third house, which I think gifts her with the different kinds of accents. So as I mentioned at the start of this, the movie that really kicked off Mirror Mirror was Julie and Julia. It was in 2009. I was visiting my mom in Michigan, and I said, Mom, this is this new movie about Julia Child out, because when I was a kid, I was fascinated by Julia Child. I loved her voice. And I used to imitate her. I'll spare you imitating her tonight, but I used to imitate her all the time. And I used to go around, talking about, different things, different components of French cooking. Obviously, I didn't know what she was talking about because I didn't speak French, but I loved what she did with such passion. And even though I grew up and, I didn't know much about her, I would still like to check into her every now and again and see what she was up to. But when this movie came out, what fascinated me about Meryl Streep is that when I was watching this film, I completely forgot that Meryl Streep was not Meryl Streep. I was so into it that to me, Meryl Streep became Julia Child. I was just absolutely amazed. And this is what started me off in looking at charts of famous people and the actors who portrayed them. So here we go. Julia Child's chart is in the middle. Now, Julia Child had Saturn conjunct her ascendant. It's a time chart. She was abnormally tall. She was 6 feet 2 inches. Meryl Streep is pretty average in height. And one of the things that struck me about this film was that it looked like Meryl Streep was really, really tall. Comes down to it, it's just, clever camera angles and all those kind of things. But Julia Child had Jupiter on her descendant, and she married somebody called Paul Child, who was an amazing person in his own right. They were kind of spies in the war, and they had this wonderful marriage. They really respected each other. And when he was posted to France, Julia obviously went with him. She didn't know any French. She taught herself French, and then she got into cooking, and she met 2 other female cooks, and they set out to translate the seminal French cookbook, and not only translate it into English so it could be understood, but actually translating metric measurements into the imperial measurements that the Americans would use. So this kind of thing would be so tedious and so difficult that I can't even imagine going through each recipe, not only replicating them and translating them, but converting the measurements as well. So lots of interesting things going on in this chart. So we have Meryl Streep's Chiron picking up Julia Child's ascendant-descendant axis, along with her Saturn-Jupiter opposition. So we're seeing, the difficulties and the joy that Julia Child had in creating this masterpiece cookbook, the thing that transformed American cuisine, the height of which at that time was TV dinners, into this magical TV series that was, it could be both funny and yet, it was something obviously that was deeply learned on the part of Julia Child, which I think was part of the reason why I was so charmed by it when I was a kid. I knew that I was watching something that was completely ingenious, but yet I could also kind of laugh because, tea towels were being set on fire and all sorts of catastrophes were going on. And Julia Child would just keep on going. She wouldn't stop. A few other things that are happening here. Julia Child's Libra, Moon in Libra is conjunct her South Node, and we have Meryl Streep's Neptune nicely picking this up. So we have this imaginatory kind of thing going on too. She's kind of tapped into what Julia Child feels comfortable with this Moon in Libra, which is the relationship aspect with her husband. It's an absolutely charming story if you ever get a chance to watch it. It's not just about Julia Child cooking, because that might not be so entertaining. It's the love that Julia and her husband have, and the way they get along, the way he supports her and the way she supports him. And you can also see that they have very similar, they're quite a ways off orb-wise, but you can see they're still in the same sign, these nodes. The other thing going on here, you can't miss this. So Julia Child's Uranus in Aquarius, nicely picked up by Meryl Streep's Jupiter in Aquarius at the same degree. And then we have, when the movie was released, the transiting North Node was conjunct all this. So we have Julia Child's innovation, Meryl Streep's ability to pick up different kinds of accents. And then we have the North Node transiting that, which gives it a kind of fated sort of feeling. Meryl Streep also played Karen Silkwood. This is a movie about sort of a working class woman, having living in a trailer with her good friend, and she has a boyfriend. They're quite poor. They don't have a lot of money, so they have to carpool it to work, and they're working in a nuclear power plant. And it's quite a terrifying story in that every now and again something goes wrong in this nuclear power plant, and somebody ends up being what they called being cooked. which means they get contaminated by radioactivity and they have to be scrubbed in the shower. How terrifying, and it's extremely painful and humiliating. And so Karen Silkwood becomes this sort of campaigner for safety rights of the workers. And she's doing a lot of work with the union. And one night she has, important papers that she's going to present to the union, and she's run off the road and killed in her car. And the papers, of course, disappear. So let's see the difference between what Meryl Streep brings to this role as opposed to the Julia Child role. So in this role, we have Karen Silkwood's Uranus in Gemini, and Meryl Streep's Mercury, nicely picking this up. So what are we talking about? Uranium and other radioactive elements, and Meryl Streep telling the story, Mercury and its rulership here. We also have Meryl Streep's Sun and Uranus in Cancer, only being a few degrees away, dissociate conjunction away from Karen Silkwood's South Node. Now, they were born in similar years, so it's not too surprising that their Plutos are only a few degrees apart. But let's look over here. We have Meryl Streep's South Node in Libra, picking up Karen Silkwood's Chiron, also in Libra. And one of the things that we see is how important it is for Karen Silkwood to form connections to her co-workers, to understand what they're going through. And Meryl Streep is able to understand the pain that Karen Silkwood has, as she is not only cooked several times, but the safety issues that she's trying to bring to the fore. Meryl Streep's North Node on Karen Silkwood's descendant. Very important, again, just backing up what we said about Libra, understanding the pain of other people and understanding sort of the fatedness of Karen Silkwood's actions. The movie was released in 1980, nicely picking up the Sun Neptune conjunction on Karen Silkwood's South Node. Again, we're talking about a difficult story, bringing things to light. So, very different things are being brought to the surface as opposed to Julia Child. We have a more of the outer planet kind of connection with the Karen Silkwood story. The Iron Lady. Okay, so I don't know if you watched The Crown. I hope you do, because it's a great series. So Iron Lady was played by Meryl Streep, but it was also played by Gillian Anderson. But let's look at the Iron Lady that Meryl Streep portrays. So the Iron Lady has her Sun Mercury conjunction in Libra. And as we said before, the South Node of Meryl Streep's chart. But this is picking up Margaret Thatcher's 12th house stuff. By the way, maybe you don't realize this about Margaret Thatcher, is that a lot of people are still quite traumatized by her reign. And if you watch The Crown, I think that you can get a sense of Meryl Streep's, she kind of rounded out Margaret Thatcher's personality, whereas Gillian Anderson made it seem quite terrifying. So let's look here. So we have the South Node in Aquarius of Margaret Thatcher, and Meryl Streep's Jupiter in Aquarius is nicely picking up this connection. Margaret Thatcher was well known for not being afraid to stand out in a crowd. She wasn't afraid to stand up to the men who looked down on her. She was, willing to fight her battles. And Meryl Streep is nicely picking this up. Now, the moon is there too, but it would have been a minor transit that day. We're not exactly sure if that was on that degree or not. But have a look at Meryl Streep's moon on Margaret Thatcher's descendant. This movie is all about Margaret Thatcher's relationships with the people around her, her fellow politicians, her husband, her children, all came into this movie. And the other thing is, oh yes, here we go. We have Margaret Thatcher's Venus in Sagittarius being picked up by Meryl Streep's Chiron in Sagittarius. And I think that what Meryl Streep was picking up was the difficulties Margaret had in fitting in and getting along with other people. There were some parts of Margaret Thatcher that relished not fitting in, but there were equally some parts of her that was very uncomfortable with not being able to make friends with the people around her. She felt very isolated, maybe misunderstood even. And the final thing is Meryl Streep's South Node, oh, I think I mentioned this, picks up on the Mercury of Margaret Thatcher. Okay. So here we go. This is from The Crown. So what does Gillian Anderson bring to this role of Margaret Thatcher? So here we go. We got Margaret Thatcher again in the middle, Gillian Anderson on the outside. So one of the things I picked up first of all was Gillian Anderson's Moon in Virgo in a dissociate conjunction to Margaret Thatcher's Moon in Leo. And what I think this is, Gillian Anderson has this knack. I found it almost more riveting than Meryl Streep's portrayal, in that Gillian Anderson was so precise in picking up Margaret Thatcher's mannerisms. There's a great scene where they're playing the drinking game called Ibble Dibble. And there's a scene where Anne is, rapping out this one Ibble Dibble, calling two Ibble Dibbles with no Ibble Ibbles, whatever it is. And then it's Margaret Thatcher's turn, of course, being played by Gillian Anderson. And Margaret Thatcher is like, number one, Ibble Dibble, calling, and she's doing it with such precision. And it's a very, very, very funny scene. In that, she's so slow about it. Everyone's looking at each other like, what, what is going on? It was a true comedy. Okay, so Pluto, when The Crown was released, and I'm looking way back at season 1. Why am I looking at season 1? Because this is when The Crown first came to our attention. And I know that there's different seasons and all that kind of stuff, but season 1 was when we first saw the whole thing. So I'm taking it like that is our first sight of The Crown. So we have transiting Pluto on Margaret Thatcher's natal Jupiter when the Crown was released. And we have this stuff going on over here too, with Margaret Thatcher's Chiron in Aries, with Gillian Anderson's Saturn in Aries. And what Gillian is picking up on, and almost making it painful to watch, is Margaret Thatcher's own sort of pain. And as I mentioned, Anderson does it with such precision that it makes it extremely uncomfortable viewing, because you're just like, you're just kind of embarrassed for Margaret Thatcher. And Uranus, transiting Uranus, was passing over this point when the series was actually released. And we have a few other things going on too. We have Gillian Anderson's Sun conjunct Mercury being very close to Margaret Thatcher's Moon conjunct Neptune. And, loads of other stuff too. You could look at Margaret Thatcher's Mars in Libra, with Gillian Anderson's South Node in Libra, with Jupiter transiting this point when the series was released. So there's a few characters in my books that, they're so important or so infamous that they require more than one film to kind of tell their story. And one such example, although there are several others, there's, for example, Stephen Hawking's, for example, there's Elizabeth the First, there's Queen Victoria, all had several actors portray them. But the serial killer, Ted Bundy, has no less than 9 biopics made about his despicable life. And I'm not glorifying him in any way. I'm just pointing out that we seem to have this fascination with this guy. Why do we have this fascination? Well, I guess because we want to think that, he's somehow, well, we hope that he's somehow unique and we never have to deal with the likes of him ever again. So here's his chart. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I want to point out that I have a time chart here, that it's got the stellium in Scorpio, which doesn't mean anything other than, he's kind of tapped into the underbelly of the world. And he's got the Sagittarius stellium as well, which I think kind of allows him to capitalize on this deep dark knowledge that he has about human nature. So one of the movies that was done about him was called Extremely Wicked, Vile, and Evil, with Zac Efron, the sweet boy that no one could imagine playing Ted Bundy. So here we go. Let's have a look at what's going on. We have Zac Efron's stellium in Scorpio picking up Ted Bundy's stellium in Scorpio. And, as it would happen, Zac Efron also has a stellium in Sagittarius picking up Ted Bundy's stellium in Sagittarius. Now, we all know that Zac Efron is not a serial killer, but he was able to step into the shoes of this horrible person. And I think, what was aided too in this is that the movie was released when transiting Jupiter in Sagittarius was conjunct Zac Efron's Saturn as well as Ted Bundy's moon. So there's this sort of a drawing out, Jupiter, of course, being in its rulership, but drawing out of the hard work of Zac Efron and the heart of the risks that Ted Bundy took in order to pull off the crimes that he did. There's a couple of films, well, there's quite a few films. The book originally had 200 films in it. And it was a massive thing. It was way too big to be in a single book. So my publisher and I had to look at ways of paring it down. And how would we do that? How are we going to decide which movies made it in and which movies did not? So I wanted to start off with Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which didn't make it in. And the reason why it didn't make it in was because it was so far off the truth. This is about the game show host, Chuck Berry, who fancied himself as being a CIA agent involved in murders and things like that. It was just so far away from a true biopic that we couldn't use it. Nevertheless, we can look at the chart. By the way, all these biopics and the book itself is dedicated to my kitty cat, Mr. Bubbles. Mr. Bubbles and I watched most of these movies together. He is my film watching buddy and my book buddy, my writing buddy. And we spent his last night together watching Lawrence of Arabia. So I like to think between, the delectable Peter O'Toole and his cuddly human that we gave him the best possible send off. But anyway, let's look at Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. So here we have Chuck Barris here with Sam Rockwell, who played him on the outside. So we have time charts as close as we can get them. But to me, we have Saturn conjunct Chuck Barris's, the actor's Saturn conjunct Chuck Barris's moon in Aries. And it's right on Chuck Barris's descendant. So I think that kind of gives us a clue that, maybe there was some sort of blockage there in understanding the emotional nature of Chuck Barris, because this is quite a manic film. There wasn't a whole lot of emotions involved other than, kind of the madcap kind of things that were going on because of the circumstances that the fake circumstances that the real life person found himself in. We have Mercury within a loose conjunction of Chuck Barris's ascendant, which kind of makes for good storytelling, but is that really a good connection? And we have maybe what makes sense is the South Node in Scorpio with Mars transiting it for the sort of undercover aspect of it. And we have Pluto transiting Sam Rockwell's Venus in Sagittarius. But there's not really a whole lot here other than those few connections. So I think that there's something about this film that kind of misses the mark. And it was an okay film, but like I say, it was just so far beyond, what we could actually believe. It pushed the credulity threshold too far. And it's hard to really believe what is actually going on screen. And that was one of the reasons why we couldn't put it in. The other one was, I really, really wanted to have Good Morning Vietnam about the DJ Adrian Cronauer, played by Robin Williams in the book. But unfortunately, it kind of falls into the same category as Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, in that it's just too far from the truth. So here we go. We have Adrian Cronauer's birth chart in the middle. It's a noon chart with Robin Williams on the middle chart, and the transits for the film's release on the outside. So one of the things we have is we have Robin Williams' sun in dissociate conjunction to Adrian Cronauer's Pluto. So maybe, the undercover stuff or the deep-seated sort of feelings, the transformative nature of the DJ were brought out by Robin Williams. There was sort of a double sort of life kind of theme going on this, but it kind of missed the mark a little bit in that Robin Williams was too much of a genius. Adrian Cronauer, was only a DJ, at a small sort of outpost in Vietnam. He wasn't like a big name, but Robin Williams turned him into a big name. And so there was a liberty with the life of Adrian Cronauer and his influence that he had. Yes, Adrian Cronauer was very funny, but it was Robin Williams who took the funny to genius level. Transiting South Node was on Robin Williams' Saturn, which almost picked up Adrian Cronauer's Neptune. But I think what this was more than anything was a vehicle for Robin Williams to showcase his talents. And, when you see this movie, I think you fall in love with Robin Williams. He's just such a genius. He really, there's no other word for what he does. But unfortunately, it was so far off the mark that it didn't quite make it into the final cut. Communion. This stars my very favorite actor, and believe me, I so very badly wanted Christopher Walken, who plays Whitley Strieber, Whitley Strieber is portrayed by Christopher Walken in this movie. This movie is bizarre, and it was absolutely slammed by critics, but it's about this writer who is visited by aliens, and he believes that he's had all sorts of examinations. He's gets away from everything by going out into the woods, into a cabin, and the aliens come into his Okay, so let's have a look at the charts and why it didn't quite catch. I thought Christopher Walken was absolutely brilliant. He's one of my favorite actors. But the thing is, this movie was so far out there and so kind of involved in conspiracy theories and things like that, that it just didn't quite make a whole lot of sense. So we have a time chart by Whitley Strieber. He has the moon in loose conjunction to Pluto, with Christopher Walken's Pluto also there. Not surprising because they're only born within a couple years of each other. But you can see there's not really a lot of connections between them. We have a loose Venus conjunction in Taurus, but it's 5 degrees apart, which sets it apart from the other films, which only had 1 or 2 degrees of orbs of aspect between them. Here we go. We have Jupiter kind of conjunct Saturn, but not really. We have Neptune. It's an outer planet, so we don't have anything really to kind of hang anything on this. Chiron was conjunct Christopher Walken's movie when the film was released. But I think, what I want you to see is that there was just nothing here. Whitley Strieber himself was disappointed in the movie. He said it went far beyond anything that actually ever happened, or it didn't make him feel that he was understood for his experiences. But Christopher Walken, as I said, he was praised. He was the only good thing about the film. So unfortunately, Communion couldn't quite fit into Mirror Mirror as much as I wanted it to. And there are trines in here, but I didn't use trines at all in my book. I was trying to make the argument that Christopher Walken, kind of fell into this because he's kind of a weirdo himself. But when he set out a methodology, like I said, I'm going to use oppositions and conjunctions within a few tight orbs. You can't then find an exception and say, okay, well, I'm going to set aside these rules, because one of the things our critics get at us for is something called confirmation bias. And that is when we start loosening up our methodology to accommodate our theory. So I wasn't going to be, accused of that. So we couldn't include communion. But I think that these movies that didn't make it in still make my point in that their synastry didn't catch. It wasn't there, and therefore we didn't use them. So it's almost like they become part of the kind of the losers club, in that they still make the point that they weren't any good because the synastry wasn't any good. So this is an interesting story. What's love got to do with Tina Turner? I have no idea why this didn't make it into the book, because I wrote about it, and yet it escaped my attention that it wasn't in the final edit. When the final edit came to me and I was looking through it, it didn't even occur to me to look for what's love got to do with it. So what this movie is about: the singer Tina Turner and her rise from dirt poor country girl to abused wife of Ike Turner to superstardom and a solo career. So Angela Bassett played Tina Turner. Tina Turner's chart is a time chart. So we have her moon in Gemini, and I'll come back to this in a second. So let's just have a look at what's going on in this biopic. It was so good. It really, really was a most excellent biopic. Angela Bassett looks just like Tina Turner, dances like Tina Turner. All the gestures were there. So their north nodes are very similar, and Angela Bassett's Jupiter in Libra is also there too. So it magnifies the destiny of Tina Turner. And Mars within a few degrees of Tina Turner's sun in Leo. So that show person, that showmanship was certainly there. And Angela Bassett played the abused wife, which I think shows with the Chiron on the descendant. And here we have Tina Turner's Saturn conjunct Angela Bassett's South Node in Aries. But the reason why I think that we kind of overlooked this is that Tina Turner's moon in Gemini is actually conjunct my ascendant in Gemini. So I think maybe I got so comfortable with Tina Turner that I completely forgot to look into checking to make sure that she was there. And by total chance, I was speaking to somebody just before we started recording. I think it was Sue that has the moon in Gemini at this degree as well. So it's a very interesting coming full circle. So,
and I love her too.
Oh, do you? Fantastic.
I do.
See, the thing is, so let me go back to that point. When you have a fascination with a character, I think you can get a whole lot out of it by comparing your chart to the real life person, because it helps you to understand, okay, Sue and Tina have this connection, and Sue loves Tina Turner. She feels comfortable with her. And I felt so comfortable with Tina Turner that I completely forgot. I just assumed that she would be there, didn't even think to go back and check that she was included in my book. So if we ever do a second, version, I'll be sure to get Tina Turner in there. I won't forget. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what's going on. There's a lot going on in my life at the moment. My first book was called Growing Pains, about astrology and education, particularly in adolescence. Mirror, Mirror is my new book, over 100 biopics. I didn't talk about them all tonight. I do a lot of work with Cosmic Intelligence Agency. I'm the CAPISA president, which means I do a lot of the work with their trainings, and with OPA, and of course with evolutionary astrologers. You can find the Solar Writer Adolescent Astrology Report on my website. So you can get a printout of your favorite teenager's birth chart, which you can discuss with them. I am bringing astrology to education, taking a brief detour with films, and this is my website where you can find me and write to me about questions. But I'm also going to open up. If anybody has any questions, now's their chance.
Alex, that was awesome, as always. I love how you can talk about it and how you make the connections. It's just awesome. So
Thank
does
you.
anybody have any questions for Alex?
Hi, Anna. How you doing? And Brenda, nice to see you.
Hello, nice to see you. No, well, it's amazing this job. I really appreciate this talk because it is very, very clear how the connections are made. It's not casual. It's not casual. I think that you made a wonderful job. Thank you,
Thank
Alex.
you, Anna. Yeah, I'm sorry about all the little technical things that went on during this.
No problem.
Me too. Such is life.
Yeah, well, I don't know what's going on today. In the
Well,
sky.
we've got the eclipse coming.
Yeah, we do. Yes. The eclipse is definitely coming. I wonder we have Saturn on the descendant in London anyway. So maybe that has something to do with all the difficulties we've had tonight.
There you go.
Blame Saturn always. Okay, well, I think that we're going to call it a night. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. That was excellent presentation.
Thank you, Alex. That was
Yeah.
really, really interesting.
Thank you.
It was, and we look forward to your Academy Awards.
Oh, that's right. Yes, the Academy Awards. I think the last Thursday of March, we're going to do it, looking at important Academy Award winners of Mirror Mirror, and maybe looking at because we have Aretha Franklin, I believe, played by. Oh dear, I can't remember who played her. Name slipped my mind. Might make it to the Academy Awards.
Awesome.
Jennifer Hudson.
Well, that will be awesome. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.